Okay, Boker Tov, let's get started. Tzaraim Tovim, welcome. All right. I will start. Okay, we'll last week we spoke about the sages of Provence. That was a little bit later, but 2 weeks ago in our last class we started Elokai Netzor, and we started talking about the problems of lashon hara. And so I want to continue, but just before I'll spend 1 minute. Last Shabbos we were in Nice in France. You've heard I always mention that when you travel, you see all the different minhagim and everything. Hopefully I'll write about it, but it was just very very cute. Obviously, the shul is a Sephardic shul. Most Jews in France are of Sephardic origin. They come from Algeria, Morocco, whatever. It used to be an Ashkenazi community, but pretty much today, France is a Sephardic community. So Nice has about, I don't know, 25,000 Jews. There's, of course, a few Chabad houses where we ate. And but the shul itself is a beautiful shul. So first of all, they had an off roof, as I'm sure many you know. In the Sephardic tradition, the off roof, I don't know if it's called an off roof. I'm sure it's called something else, but I call it an off roof. It's done the week after the wedding. In other words, the
Shabbat
wedding was,
Chachan.
what's it called? A Shabbat Chat.
Shabbat Chachan.
Well, that's what we call an off-roof too, a
Oh,
Shabbat
okay.
Chatan. Okay, whatever. Anyway, yeah, off-roof, I guess, I assume is a Yiddish word, so no one in the Sephardic community would speak Yiddish. Okay, anyway, but they had that. It was very beautiful. But just a couple of very cute things I'll mention. I found that really, I mean, it's, they daven everything out loud. And we rely a lot, at least I rely a bit on Shomea Ka'ona. When everybody has to make Kiddush on Friday night, but not everybody makes Kiddush. One person makes Kiddush and everybody listens, and we say that's great. There's nothing, or as long as you listen, Shomea, when you listen Ka'ona, it's as if you said it yourself. So this principle applies in a lot of things. In theory, it applies for when the repetition of the Amida. We'll get to that soon. We'll repeat the Amida, so you can listen to the Amida and answer Amen, and you fulfill your mitzvah. But in the Sephardic community, I'm sure if you go to a real Eidot Mizrach shul, so very often different parts like Bircha Kriyashma. So one person says it, everybody's quiet, everybody listens. You answer Amen. I don't think people say it quietly. I don't know. I don't see any reason why you have to say it quietly. You can just listen to who's ever saying it and answer. I mean, the Shema they say together. They each individually. Shmo Netzor they say individually, but lots of parts they say quietly. But it was very interesting when they did Ahava Rabbah. They did the Karbach tune V'hayar Einenu B'Toratecha V'hayar Einenu B'Toratecha V'davek Liveinu B'Mitotecha V'Yached. So I found that so interesting. In as far as show, they also did the Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadoleinu, Ein Kemalkeinu. So I don't know. Everybody today is influenced by everybody. It's interesting. They also said Tfilah L'Shlom HaMedina when they took out the Sefer Torah. As the Chazan and the Rabbi are standing by the Aron Kodesh, and they took out the Sefer Torah. That's where they said Tfilah L'Shlom for the prayer for the state of Israel. I know I found that very very interesting. All kinds of interesting minhagim they do. Then they also had a nice kiddush that I guess is everybody's minhag. But anyways, okay, that's just a point here or there. But it is interesting, and minhagim, as I often mention, I sometimes like to point them out. It's always very fascinating to see how different shuls. By the way, we're in Italy now, so. You had that in France too a little bit, but much more in Italy. Italy basically is its own minhag. Italy is neither Ashkenaz or Sfard. If you come, I don't know how many people have been to Italy before or spent a Shabbos in Italy. So twice in my life I spent Shabbos in Italy. This will be my third time. So Italian minhagim are they're sort of neither Ashkenaz or Sfard. Italy developed their own minhagim, and one of the outgrowths of that is the fact that in most Italian shuls, until here they told me till the 1980s, in Milan, they used to have an organ playing on Shabbat. Now, people listening here, you're going to think this is like, what are you nuts? This is like a reform shul. These are, it's not, Orthodox is like, there's no such thing as Orthodox Judaism. It's just made up. When the reformers called us Orthodox, and then we took it upon to call ourselves Orthodox. I don't know what that means. But in Italy, these were, obviously every shul has a mechitza. These are traditional shuls for 2,000 years. That's just how their tradition. And it's not so hard. It's actually quite easy to give a heter to play a musical instrument on Shabbos and Shul. It's actually very easy. We use a Shabbos goy for all kinds of things, and in the Middle Ages, it was used for more things than we use it today. With people to heat up the house before electric, before heating in the home. So everybody had a Shabbos goy. So the halach is you're allowed to have a Shabbos goy if for sure if it's a rabbinic thing. If it's a rabbinic prohibition for a mitzvah, then for sure a Shabbos goy is allowed. So playing musical instruments on Shabbos is a rabbinic prohibition, no biblical prohibition to play a musical instrument. It's a rabbinic prohibition. It might break and you might fix it, and fixing it would be a biblical prohibition. But playing the piano or a guitar or a violin, and even an electric guitar, because electricity, according to pretty much everybody today, is at most a rabbinic prohibition. And then it enhances the tefillah, just like in the Beit HaMikdash, they had music and probably musical instruments. The Levim for sure sang. Question is, did they also play instruments? We know David HaMelech played the harp, whatever. That was where the Reform movement, of course, picked it up. But if you're not influenced by, once the Reform movement picked it up, this became anathema. Absolute anathema. That became the battle against Orthodox Reform in Germany. In Hungary, it was the Mechitz in the middle. Different places had different battles, but the organ became like a viyavot hatuma, the height of impurity. But Italy was totally unimpacted by Reform. There was no Reform in Italy. It was just a traditional community. So they played the organ. They used to play the organ on Shabbos. You go to the traditional schools, you can see where the organ was. So this morning I was in the shul in Milan. It's a beautiful shul. Unfortunately, they don't use it in the summer because the air conditioning's not working. Well, it wasn't so hot, but anyways, they have it downstairs, which isn't nearly as nice. So the guide was explaining to us that they refurbished the shul in the 1990s. Somebody in New York gave a lot of money. It's a beautiful shul, beautiful windows and whatever. And I said, what was wrong with the shul? So he said, well, they didn't like, they didn't like having an organ there. They didn't like all these things. So they removed this stuff from the shul. This is only in the 1990s. I said, until when did they play it? He says until the 1980s. They used to play it. Not so long ago. I think pretty much everybody on this Zoom was probably alive in the 1980s. If you weren't, say hello. It's that's just a very interesting thing. But you have to understand the context. Somebody comes somewhere, doesn't know what's flying, so they make jump out to all kinds of conclusions. So that's just really one of the very interesting things. You see it in the shul in Florence. You see it in all the shuls that one of the Italian minhagim was they used to play instruments. I don't know when I mentioned it last year, we were in Berlin. I went with that about 8 years ago. That's a fantastic trip, by the way. I know a lot of people don't want to go to Germany. It makes no sense. It makes a lot of emotional sense. I get it emotionally. It makes no rational sense. Germany is the one country you should go to in Europe. I understand you want to go to France. I understand you want to go to Italy. On these countries, you don't want to go to all these countries that are Spain or anti-Israel. Germany is the most pro-Israel country in Europe. It's also the country that has done the most to deal with the Holocaust. But I get it. It makes no sense, but people don't think rationally, and I understand emotionally. But that was really a fantastic trip we did to Germany. And in Berlin, we visited on Friday afternoon, quote unquote, the Reform rabbi. We met with him, very interesting. I was actually quite impressed with him. And we asked him if we could come. The davening, let's say the Orthodox shul was davening 8 o'clock, and the Reform shul was davening at 7 o'clock. So we asked him, could we come? We we don't want to insult you if we walk out early. Like, I don't want to go to Reform, walk out early. He said, no, please come. So we went, and we did have to leave a little early. It was fascinating. First of all, it's a very traditional davening. I mean, in terms of the words, the siddur was, I don't remember exactly, it wasn't 100%, it was very complete. They had a woman chazanit. They had an organ and a mixed choir, and it's a Reform shul, but they had a mechitza, because in Germany the modern Reform, the non-mechitza, that's an American invention. Family that prays together stays together. That's America. In Europe, it's understood. You go to a synagogue, men and women do not sit together. So the Reform shul in Berlin, the height of the center of Berlin. People think of Berlin, the center of Reform. And they're having in 2015, and I'm assuming in 2025, the Reform Shul has a mechitza. It's not only a mechitza, it's a balcony. It's a raised platform. You know, the mechitza that most of our shuls have, the young Israels tend to have, with not balconies. I've often said the rabbis, thankfully, didn't make a big issue of that because believe me, they could have decided that those mechitzas are all invalid. The mechitza has to be on another level. The goal of mechitza is men and women can't interact, not that they can't see each other. I don't have to tell you when the mechitzas are side by side, men and women interact. You go to any shul on Shabbos, some man's talking to whatever, something in the davening. There's always movement between the two sections of the mechitza. And the rabbis could have easily said, whoever heard of mechitza were on the same level. You go to any shul in Europe, never you have the mechitza on the same level. It's always a balcony. So it's just interesting how things developed historically. Okay, so it's just very, you have to understand the context and to understand how rabbis work. And the question is, of course, why did mechitza did become such a big issue? That's another question. Why is it such a big issue? It's not even mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, but okay, that's a whole other discussion. But it's just fascinating when you see how different communities, what they consider reform and not reform, etc. Okay, enough of that. Let's get back to Elokai Netzor. Okay, so I just want to start. So we spoke 2 weeks ago really about Yehil Yehil Ratzon in Refi, and when should you say it, before or after, like at the end or at the beginning? We had to combine puts Gulal Tefillah, redemption. We say Gal Yisrael, then we daven. We have that at the beginning. We have that at the end. We said Yehil Ratzon is the 19th chapter in Tehillim, and that's why we say it at the end. It should really be at the beginning, right? Yeah, God, you should hear our prayers. You heal our son and refree. You only be what the meditations of our heart and our lips should be heard. So that should be before we daven. So the Gemara says because David HaMelech said it after he davened the 19th parak of Tehillim, as we found that a very interesting thing. Therefore, we say it after 19th, sort of as the 19th bracha. We say that's when we do it. So we said that demonstrates the connection between Tehillim and prayer. David HaMelech, the Sefer Tehillim, is the sort of place of prayer. That's where most of our prayers come from. It's really a fascinating idea. And then we pointed out that the beginning of chapter 20, Lamaseach Mizmor LeDavid, that we say every day between Ashrei and Uval Etzion, that Hashem should answer us, Yancha Hashem B'Yom Tzara. So we have Geula and Tfilah, Hashem Tzari V'Go Ali, and then we say Yancha Hashem Beit Tzara. We daven in the time of need, and as Rav Soloveitchik develops the most, and based on the Ramban, that Tfilah is a response to an Eit Tzara, to a time of need. We daven only because we have needs. If we don't have needs, at least this is how the Ramban and the Rav claims that even the Rambam understands it this way, that without needs, there's no need to pray. A person who has no needs, they should not pray. The prayer is not about praise. That's something else. Prayer is about asking for needs, and that's the connection. Gula and Tfilah, that's chapters 19 and chapters 20 in Tehillim. Okay, so let's get a little bit into Elokai Netzor. So we mentioned that the Gemara says everybody speaks Lashon Hara. So the Gemara says everybody. So it says everybody? Everybody speaks it, really? So the answer is yes, everybody does. Who are we kidding? But okay, the Gemara, they were more pious. We assume they were a little more pious than we are. It may or may not be true. By the way, I will tell you that it's really, and I remember Rav Schechter mentioned this once, the great Torah scholars of the Middle Ages were much greater. We're traveling in Provence and the Ravid and the Balamor and all these amazing people and the Rishonim. So they were like, way better than anybody today. But the average Balabas, the average, whatever Jewish person was much more learned than the average, Jew in Germany or France or Spain in the Middle Ages. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We have the most learned generation in Jewish history by a million miles. Everything. The fact that every Jew, every observant Jew, and even the thousands of non-observant Jews get a Jewish education is unheard of. Who got a Jewish education? Europe, the elite of the elite. So the gap in the Middle Ages was enormous between the sort of elite, the rabbinic elite, and the average person. Today, the gap is much narrower. The rabbis are not as great, as by and large, and the average person is much greater. So we were actually talking on the trip, the smog, or this was, I believe, in Lunel. So there was a problem: is the religious Jews didn't put on tefillin every day. It wasn't like whatever. So they, where's they put on tefillin every day? Like whatever. So the smug, the Sefer Mitzvot Gadol, Rav Moshe of Kuchi, that's in France. So he went on a campaign to get people to put on tefillin before the Lubavitcher Rebbe, whatever. I'm just talking about religious people. These are Shomer Shabbos people. Religious, they didn't put on tefillin. It wasn't such a big deal. So you have all kinds of things like that throughout history. People, so whatever people. It's not exactly true. We're probably much more. I mean, Rabbi Akiva, who was a total ignoramus till the age of 40, that's the way most people are. We today are on a much higher level. Don't let any rabbi tell you that the average Jew today is on a lower level than the average Jew 100 years ago. And I bet you on most people in this room right now in this call probably know more than their parents know. Because anybody who has parents who were sort of didn't get a day school education it depends how old you are, but pretty much your parents in Europe were by and large not very learned. You're more learned. That's just the way the Jewish community is built. Obviously, there are exceptions, but I'm talking about it. The average person is much more learned. So it's not true at all that we're the worst generation and everybody better. That's just they tell you for Musser, but it's not true historically, and I don't think we gain anything by saying it. Yes, we don't have there are many things we've lost, but the breadth of knowledge among the average Jew is an enormous, wonderful thing that we've never had before. Never in Jewish history have had such learned people, who are business people and doctors, lawyers. We didn't have so many doctors and lawyers and investment bankers either, because Jews didn't have the opportunities they had. Okay, but the Gemara says everybody
Rabbi
speaks Hebrew.
Kelman.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
just wanted to make the comment that may be true, that intellectually we know more, but experientially, I think the Rav talks about this. There was that fear of God, or that, on an everyday basis, the overall piety that might be lacking today.
Yes and no. I don't know. I mean, you have the stories like the woman who comes to shul and she doesn't know how to daven. Like, I mean, the Hasidic stories, the guy
I'm not
goes.
saying whether or not that what they knew, but just what they felt. Like I can't begin to describe to you what Erev Yom Kippur was
Yeah,
like
that's a little bit
in
of
my
Chaim
parents'
Soloveitchik's
house.
article.
Both
Yeah,
my parents grew up in Europe, and you just felt it. And
I
I do
agree.
all,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
tried it. I can't recreate that for my kids.
that's
Like, I do my
correct.
best, but it's not this. You just felt it. There was a
Yeah,
certain
yeah. I,
awe
I,
in
re-
the
I
house.
yeah, I agree. I remember years ago, Barrow Wine spoke in Toronto, and he was describing, I think, I don't remember his exact speech, but it was right after the Gulf War, so it must have been 91, 92. He spoke in Toronto, and he said something. In fact, it's very hard to raise, like in high school, to raise, religious, deeply religious kids and the New York Yankees. Like it doesn't go like with, and I'm not, listen, Rav Aron Lichtenstein was a huge baseball fan. Like I'm not, but you're right. The culture in America is so overpowering. It is hard. And that's Chaim Soloveitchik's article. At the end, if you remember in Rupture and Reconstruction, Chaim Soloveitchik says in the 1950s, I guess it must have been, he spent Elul and Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur in Punovich Yeshiva. And he said, something was missing. Yeah, the learning, is amazing. People learning 15 hours a day. But he sort of felt, and then he put his finger on it and said, in Boston, when he grew up, these were people who were Mechalei Shabbos. They ate treifus. But when they came to Shul on Yom Kippur, they had a much more powerful intimacy with God than they had in Punovich. That's how, if you remember, for those who have to read Rupture and Reconstruction, which I often mention, that's the end of Chaim Soloveitchik's article, that in Boston, these Jews who were totally not religious, but Yom Kippur, oh my gosh. And they would cry, like they felt Yom Kippur. And in Punovich, it's not just in Punovich, it's not any different than YU, it's very hard for us. We have a much more intellectual approach to Judaism. What can I say? Okay. Anyways, let's try to get part of this while we're doing Elokai Netzor. But because I started, the Gemara says we all talk, if not Lashon Hara, then we all talk at least Avak Lashon Hara. Avak Lashon Hara is sort of secondary Lashon Hara. I said, that's often if you praise somebody, somebody makes on, you know how you can talk Lashon Hara without saying a word. You make a facial expression, the way you move, the way you move your eyes. There's all kinds of avak lashon hara, or you praise somebody because you know they're going to respond to you in negative. So everybody does that. It's an unavoidable sin, and I often say I always find these Gemaras very inspiring. I really do, because otherwise people get OCD or whatever the word is, because they go crazy, and I'm a sinner. Yeah, of course we're sinners. Yeah, that's how God created us, that we sin. Good, very nice. That's why I have Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. We should try to sin less, but don't tear your hair out because you spoke lashon hara once. Like it's okay. Obviously you should try not to, it's impossible to never speak lashon hara. Let's put it that way. That's what the Gemara is saying. Everybody does it. So that's why we pray 3 times a day, 365 days a year, and 4 times on Shabbos and 5 times on Yom Kippur. Elokai, Netzor, l'shanai meira. God, help me that I shouldn't speak so much negative, because if it was easy, I wouldn't need God's help so much. So that's the first thing we're doing, just to realize it. The fact that we say this, the fact that this was chosen as the tefillah after tefillah, to say after we daven, is in itself is significant. We mentioned last week, Mirma was Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu was the first one who ba'achicha b'mirma. He came in deceit. Anochi Esa b'charecha. That's not in the praise of, in other words, what Rashi says, I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, right? When Yitzchak said, who are you? He says, Anochi Esav B'charecha, I'm Esav, your firstborn. So Rashi says, he said, Anochi, I'm who I am, comma, Esav B'charecha. So that Rashi has to be properly understood. I think what Rashi is trying to say is, even when you lie, you should try to lie with the modicum of truth. So in other words, of course, we know Yaakov suffered his whole life because of what he did. Even if what he did was right, he suffered. But that's bimirma. That's really deceitful, because you're making it sound like, oh yeah, yes, it's not. It's like stabbing you in the back and not in the heart. And of course, the rabbis would prefer people stab people in the heart. We know that from Yosef and the brothers. V'lo yachlu davro imo b'shalom. After Yosef's brothers, after his dreams, he told his brothers the dreams. The Torah says they couldn't speak to him in peace. And Rashi says, we talk nutan. From the negative, you learn the positive. Baruch Hashem, at least they didn't play games with him. They didn't pretend to be nice to him and then throw him in the pit. They told him, I hate your guts. We hate you. Good. So I don't know. Today, that's not politically correct. I don't know what the word is. And maybe there are exceptions. Maybe there are times you do have to put on a face, even though you can't stand the person. But Rashi's saying, ideally, it's much better to confront. And of course, that's why the prohibition is lo tishnat achicha bilvavecha. Do not hate your brother in your heart. And many of the commentators point out, to hate your brother not in your heart, to say I hate your guts, it's not good, but it's not a violation of this prohibition. The prohibition is, don't hate someone in your heart. Why? Because if I say that I hate you, there's hope that we can reconcile. We can talk about it. If I keep my hatred in the heart, there'll never, ever be reconciliation. So the Torah is specifically prohibiting not hatred, it's prohibiting hatred that's hidden. So that's mirma, and that's one thing. Now, but I want to focus on and those who curse me, my soul shall be quiet. So is this true? I mean, I guess it's true. We pray for it 3 times a day. But what does that mean? That it should be quiet. So first of all, the word vayidom, Aharon. Okay, but our soul should be quiet. And my soul should be like dust, or not dust, what's a far sand, l'chol tiyeh, for everybody. So what does that mean? You want to tell me what that means? What do we mean when we say, and I want to connect, that those who curse me, I should be silent, and my soul should be like dirt for everybody.
Like, even when provoked, one shouldn't answer back, like to be
Where,
humble, like not
where
to
do you
get
see that?
angry when somebody
What's the notion of afar? Why do you use like afar? And is it true? Aren't you supposed to answer back? If somebody accuses you of something, right? We learned by Chana. The Gemara says Chana, who's the paradigm of prayer. Chana, where the Gemara says we learn so many great halakas of Chana. So Chana is sitting davening, and Eli thinks she's a drunk. And then when she finished, she said, no, I'm not drunk. I was praying to God. And the Gemara derives from here that you learn when somebody accuses you of something and it's not true, you have to answer back. You have to answer back. You can't just let them think you're a drunkard when you're not. You're shuckling back and forth. By the way, shuckling is first mentioned in the Sefer Amanhi in Provence. The Rav Yarchi, I forget his first name. That's where shuckling is first mentioned. Comes from Provence. No. Anyway, what? So what are we supposed to answer? Or are we not supposed to answer? So I guess the question really is it depends on what the situation is, but then what they're doing and what's happening. So let's take a look at one Gemara here, and but before I start, of course, the style I immediately, of course, I mean maybe I said this 10,000 times before I thought of it, but immediately when I was preparing for this year, the first thing that popped into my mind, the legal line of Shittilom, of course, is Aaron HaKohen, Vayidam Aaron. He's totally silent. Now, when the Torah used Vayidom Aaron, what does it mean? He was silent. I don't know that he was total. It means, I think it means he accepted. They accepted God's decree. It's
Right.
a terrible thing. His two children were killed. Doesn't. I'm assuming he was quiet, but it's not so much quiet as in acceptance. I think, and that's of course the way we understand it here in our tefillah. Those who curse us, nafshi tidom, we should be silent. And the Torah T'mima explains, along the lines of what you're saying at the beginning, not only should be silent, nafshi tidom. What is saying? They should say, believe me, sfatai tidom. My lips should be silent, or lashon tidom. What's the nafshi tidom? What do you mean my soul shall be quiet?
We shouldn't be provoked. We
So,
should have inner peace.
so the way the Torah T'mima says you shouldn't even be upset inside. Very often we're upset, but we don't say anything. In other words, somebody curses us, gets upset at us, lets us have it. So we should be quiet. We should be quiet, but you can be quiet and be upset. The prayer is we should, who cares? Like, the halacha is if you punch
It
somebody in the
shouldn't ruffle us.
face. I'm sorry?
It shouldn't ruffle us. We
Right, at
shouldn't.
all. Right. So the halacha is a boshet. When you assault somebody in Jewish law, there are five types of punishment you have to take. So one is embarrassment. So how much you embarrass somebody? If I have to walk around with a black eye because you punched me in the face, that's embarrassing to me. So you have to pay me money. So how much money do you have to pay me? So the courts, we have that, I think, in American courts too. I don't know what they call it. I don't know if they have pain and suffering, which we have also. You have to pay for pain. They have to assess the monetary value of the pain, which is basically how much money. Well, there's a debate how you do it. How much money would you pay, in the insurance form if you lose an arm, you lose a leg? So how much money would you pay so somebody won't chop off your arm? Or, if somebody offered or somebody offered you $10 million, I don't know, there's some people who would say, okay, I don't know, that's a little bit crazy. But in theory, somebody would say, okay, or you're willing to I'm willing to be punched in the face. If somebody offered me $50 million, I'd probably be willing to be, it depends who. I'm not some professional boxer, but maybe it's worth it. A shot in the arm, no, for $50 million a year, you're in pain for an hour, big deal, right? So that's how the courts assess pain. So how do they assess embarrassment? So it says it depends who you are and who they are. If the queen, if Prince Charles insults you, that's very embarrassing. But if some lowlife insults you, who cares? It's insignificance, and that's we know that all the time. Who cares what that person thinks of me? But if it's somebody important, you do care. So that's really what they were saying. That no matter who, if somebody insults you, you should just not care. Like, don't take it seriously. And with Sefer HaChinuch says something that he says it on revenge. I actually find this extremely difficult. I really do, and I'm not even sure I totally agree with it hashkafically. I'm not sure. I'm not sure this represents traditional Jewish thought, but it represents a strand of Jewish thought for sure. What the Torah T'mima says, you're not allowed to take revenge, right? That's a law in Torah. Somebody doesn't invite you to their bar mitzvah, you can't take revenge. Well, it's usually a monetary thing. Whatever. You didn't give me money. You didn't give me a loan when I needed it. I won't give you a loan, even though I could. You're not allowed to take revenge. Why not? Why can't you take revenge? What's wrong with taking revenge? wait a minute, a court takes revenge. You steal money, the court takes revenge. You got to pay double. You steal $100 from me, you got to pay me back $200. Isn't that revenge?
Because really
That's
it all
not,
comes
no,
from
that's
God.
justice, and
Punishment.
you're not an arbiter.
Right. So only a court can take revenge. A human being can't. Okay.
That's not revenge. It's punishment. It's justice. It's a different thing.
It's justice. Right. So what is when somebody won't lend me money and then I say, well, I won't lend you money, is that revenge or justice?
One is personal and one is from a court.
Well, no, well, I don't get it. The court is personal. Some person goes to court, and Reuven goes to
Well, the
court.
court is
He's-
God's
I
representative.
was going to say a court is from God. It's not coming from your vengeful. It's not a personal vendetta.
Somebody steals $100 from me, so I can ignore it, or I can go to court. I can
Right.
ignore it. So maybe the Torah says, just ignore it. So it's a big deal. So we don't say that though. We say you can go to court and get $100, right? So
Right.
why if somebody refuses to help, why should we help them? Is that revenge, or maybe the only way they'll learn is if we give them a taste of their own medicine? Isn't that what we say? So I don't, it's very unclear what exactly are the parameters, right? I don't have to I don't want I have to like analyze more halakhically if we're giving like a halakhic share on this, but when exactly, should you let it go and say no? You could have the fact that it's done in a court, I don't know how much difference that really makes. It's the person who sues in court. The court is just you have rights in court, and therefore you can take it out on the person. So what the Torah Mima says, and this will make the question I think even harder, is you know what? If somebody hurt you, that was God's will. Everything that happens in this world is God's will. And since all Jews are like one people, right? If your right hand accidentally hits your left hand's not going to hit your right hand back. This is a nice idea, right? Right? If your right hand hits your left hand's not going to hit your right hand. So if one Jew hurts another Jew, we're all the same people. So why would I hurt him? It's very nice, but it's not exactly true. We know that's not exactly true, but that's A. And B, it's the will of God for you to have suffered. So when you're taking revenge, you're trying to go against the will of God. So I say, I'm not sure this represents classical Jewish thought. I love the Sefer Chinuch. He's like my favorite book. I think you've heard me say that. It's the best overview of Judaism ever written. But I don't really understand this point in the Sefer Chinuch, because I could say that when somebody steals $100 from me, it's also God's will. And why am I trying? Anything is God's will. We don't live like that. We're supposed to live our life as if there's no God. I know that sounds ridiculous, but of course we're supposed to live our life as if God doesn't intervene in the world, I guess is what I mean. When you get sick, you don't pray to God. Maybe you can pray to God too, but you go to a doctor, right? That's classical Jewish thought. Ein somchim al hanes. You have a flat roof, build a right, he's going to die anyway. That's not your problem. It's God's problem. You have to ignore God. You have a flat roof, you build a fence. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. The Torah always does that. The Torah doesn't say rely on God. So the idea that he hurt me, that's God's will, don't take revenge. So I don't know, maybe the Sefer Chinuch is distinguishing between monetary and emotional, but I think the world we live in, we understand that emotional pain is often much worse than monetary pain. So you lose $100, big deal, but being insulted can be much more devastating and be hurting you. So I don't really understand that towards Mima about why he says we shouldn't take revenge. So now we have to figure out what is it. So hopefully, let's take a look at a couple of sources, and hopefully we'll come to a better understanding. But really what I'm raising is a problem that I don't have a complete answer to, is where do you draw the line between I'm going to stand up for what is deserving of me, and times where just let it go. It's the same question. When should you be mochel on your kavod, right? There's a halacha that a teacher, a parent can say, you don't have to honor me. By the way, a king is not allowed to say that. As a Talmid Chacham, we assume can say that. But there's a fine line there too. The Gemara sometimes says that Talmid Chacham does have to take revenge, whatever, we'll see. So let's take a look at one source here to get started. And this is a source in the Gemara in Gittin, of all places. Okay. So the Gemara says like this, Tana Rabbanan ha'ne'elavim ve'inam olvim. Those who are insulted but do not insult others. Shomim charpatan ve'inei mishmim. They hear their degradation when somebody lets them have it. They just sit there quietly. Vosi me'ava, and they worship God. I'm presuming that's what it means. They worship God out of love. Usmechim yisurin. They're willing to accept their any suffering that comes on them. This is very much along the lines of what I said, the Torah was saying a little bit. Aleim HaKatuv Omer, about these people, the verse says, V'o'avav keseit hashemesh b'gvurato. He is loved, it's love like the power of the sun in its total glory. This represents the great power of man. There's a great power of man that he's willing to listen and to become insulted and not to answer. I just find this comment of the Marsha is very interesting. The Marsha, I'll just quote one comment. He says like this. What's this? Okay. Says like this. A person who doesn't respond people are going to respect that person. You don't respond to every insult. That's a person of character. That's a person, he's refined, he's unflappable, he doesn't get insulted. He's going to be beloved by people. And whoever is beloved by people, God will be loved by God because everybody's created in the image of God, right? God wants us to get along with people. It's the most important mitzvah in the Torah. So therefore, we want, the way the Marshals explain this Gemara is we want to do whatever we can that people should like us and and respect us. And the way to do that is not going on a temper tantrum anytime somebody does something wrong. It's just to show you're better than they are. You're higher level. Now, again, this doesn't work with everybody, of course, but it often can work. That's one idea. The Hagat Yavetz here, that's Rav Yaakov Emden. So Rav Yaakov Emden says very interesting. Near Rebbe Nai, it appears to me, says like this: Shekol posel b'mumo posel. This is what do we call in English? If you live in glass houses, don't throw stones. Is that how the expression goes? Right. Generally, when people insult people, they're reflecting themselves. They're reflecting when you yell at somebody, you're this, and that. Basically, that's often yourself expressing who you are, and you're projecting. There's probably some term in psychology about this. You're projecting your defects onto somebody else, and just let the guy have the air and just ignore the person. But anyways, I don't know that nafshi tidom, it's 100% idea that it doesn't mean you're not allowed to respond when it's proper to respond. By the way, when you say Tefillah Zakah before Kol Nidre, so we say, Tefillah Zakah is this beautiful prayer by the Chai Adam of Yisrael Danzig. What's his name? Yisrael Danzig? I think in Germany in the 18th century, late in the beginning of the 19th century. They have this very long tefillah that the minhag developed to say when I'm in yeshiva, your typical person doesn't say it. Average balabas doesn't say it, but it's a beautiful tefillah. And in it, he says, I want to forgive everybody, even though I forgive everybody who harmed me, and everybody should forgive me. But I don't renounce my right to go to court, and if people owe me money or people have wronged me in a way that I'm entitled to get compensation, I'm not renouncing that right, and I'm not forgiving them, etc. So there is an idea. The question is, where do you draw the line? I think in this prayer, we just stop in. So we're saying, you want to go through the day. It's very beautiful. Don't get upset when somebody curses you. Be silent. Accept it. Tidom, there is a certain acceptance of the divine will, like Aaron, and like what the Sefer Hachinuch says. But I guess what I'm saying is I struggle exactly how far we take that. The next line is a little bit easier, I think, to understand. Nafshi kafar l'chotiyah. We should be like the earth, kafar, the afar, it's the sand of the earth, whatever, the dust of the earth, to everybody who comes. So what does this mean? So where does this come from? Again, the first thing that popped into my mind when I think of nafshi ka'afar, what pops in? I don't know. Let's see if our minds, if we think alike, if maybe
Anochi
I have
afar
such a big.
ve'efer.
There you go. I
Abraham.
see.
Abraham.
There you go. Vanochi afar ve'efer. Now here we only say afar. So what does it mean? Where does vanochi afar ve'efer come from? When does Avram use that expression?
In the fight with the kings,
I was
maybe?
asking
No,
Hashem.
when he's asking Hashem with the 40, 50, 30.
Very good. When he's asking God to forgive him from Stom, when he's arguing with Stom. Now I think this is so cool. Let's go here. God says, God is talking to himself, right? God says, this is like the basis of Judaism, right? Hashem Amar, and God said, he's not talking to anybody, he's talking to himself, right? The angels have just left to tell Abram and Sarah they're going to have a baby. We were at the Chagall Museum in Nice, by the way. Chagall, it is amazing. I assume most people have not been to the south of France. Almost nobody in our trip had ever been on the south of France. And Chagall, Marc Chagall lived there. I remember he had these beautiful, beautiful murals that he painted for this museum, the Chagall Museum. And he has, most of it is biblical themes, and they're really amazing, beautiful. And the first one you walk in is the three angels coming to greet Abraham. And the imagery and how he portrays it is so powerful and so beautiful. Anyway, so the angels have just left. They told Avram and Sarah they're going to have a kid. And God says, am I going to hide from Avram what I'm going to do? Avram's my partner. He's going to be the father of a great nation. And I know that he's going to teach his children to do the path of God. This is the mission of the Jew. Tzedakah u'mishpat, shamru derech Hashem, to follow God's path. And therefore, you don't just destroy people. You better consult with Abraham. So God says, okay. So God says, the people in Sodom, it's really bad what's going on down there. Let me go and see. And again, Rashi comments, God didn't need to go and see. It's to teach us, don't judge from a distance. This is an amazing message. Even God won't judge from the distance. Don't rely on hearsay. Other people told you. Check it out yourself. Erdana, God has to go down himself. That's what it says in the verse. And let me see what they're doing. And they go, and then Abraham begins his discussion. Maybe there are 50 people. How can you do that? God, chas v'shalom. God forbid, God, that you should kill them if there are 50 or 45 people, 50 people in the city. God, you would be an unjust God. It's a pretty chutzpahdik of Abraham. Hashofei kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. God, are you not going to do justice? And God doesn't get upset. God agrees. And then Abraham says, oh my God, what did I just do? So I told God I'm afar ve'efer. Now we only say afar. We don't say efer. Nafshi afar. So I just find this, the pshat of the Netzor that I'm going to share with you in 1 minute, amazing. What is afar and efer? What's the difference between afar and efer?
One is dust, one is ashes.
I understand. Who cares? Why is Abraham saying this?
I remember learning this. One is what you use when you begin to plant something. Afar are the seeds you plant in there, or that's and one is ashes at the end of something. One is
very good.
Birth and one is death.
For whatever reason, I don't know why this is happening, but my commentary is not coming out. Okay, so then it's very, very good, Debbie. He says like this. Afar and Efer, one is the past, one is the future. What's Afar? Afar is growth. Everything in this world, we couldn't live without things growing in the ground. So the ground is what gives life. The ground is what gives life. Efer is when you burn something, ashes. It's what once was, but no longer will be. So as he puts it, Abraham saying, I don't have any zchut avot. I don't have any merit, the Efer, from my dust, like ashes, something that was burned, but the leftovers, like we say that by Kedat Yitzchak always, that God should remember the zchut avot, the ashes, so to speak, from the Akedah. The ashes were once was, you made a fire, it's now destroyed, and what's was. And the Efer is what will be, everything that was planned. So Abraham is saying, I have no merit from the past and no merit for what will be in the future. I'm coming to ask for God from pure chesed, pure kindness, that God should help them, not because of they had some merit or what may be in the future. You know, we say, oh, God saw that, I don't know, Ruth would come from Moab or whatever it is, so you spare them. But that's just, so I think that's just a very fascinating explanation. But of course, that's not exactly, I mean, that's not really our tefillah so much. That's by Avram, but Afar, Nafshi Kafar L'chotiyeh is a little bit different. But some say along those lines, we should say, Nafshi Kafar, let them insult us. The Jewish people will exist forever. We are like Afar, everything that's planned. We give life to the world. We bring morality to the world. We are the Afar Haaretz. So we often look at that as a negative thing, but it's a very positive thing because afar is what gives life to the whole world. So nafshi afar l'chotiyeh, we should realize that we are the ones who provide life. Don't worry that somebody insults you. Who cares? Tosfot takes this a step further and he puts it sort of on a national level. And here I'll do it from the real Daf. I can find it. I think I have it. Yeah, here we go. Brachot. So this is where Elokai Netzor comes from. Remember, we did a few weeks ago, the 11 Tefillot, they said. So it's interesting. The only one expression Tosfot explains is here. The stand of the earth will never disappear. Otherwise, there won't be a world. So Tosfot says, I don't know if it fits 100% with the words. Tosfot says, this is a prayer that the Jewish people should live forever. We should be like the Afar Haaretz. But let every Rome, Italy, we're in France, it's very interesting to learn about history, but, we're the same people of 3,000 years ago, it's a very different France. It's everywhere is different. The Jews are of a permanent nature. That's what we're saying. So somebody insults you, who cares? The Jewish people are eternal. We're never going to be defeated. And that's what we should keep in mind. We should take a much broader nationalistic view of this. That's how that's I think also comes from. That's what Tosfot says, and also the Rav Soloveitchik picks up on this theme, the idea that our persecutors are here today and gone tomorrow, and the Jewish people will live forever. Okay, so that's what we say. Nafshika parlikotia. Think of us. We're like the earth. We give seeds. We give growth, and therefore we should not get too offended. I also think those who curse us. I assume the assumption here, and that really answers it much a lot easier, is these are people who are like anti-Semites. I don't know for sure. Like you could interpret it, it's your next door neighbor you got into a fight with, or your colleague, or somebody in work, or you could interpret it on a more global scale, which the way Tosfot seems to be interpreting of Soloveitchik, are the enemies of the Jewish people are insulting the Jews. And therefore, who cares? We've outlived everybody. I remember that was, I don't know why I'm thinking of it now, it pops in my head. That was Norman Lamb's, Pshat, Dr. Lamb, when the temple stood. So one of the questions was why on every night we eat meat any way we like, but on Pesach night we only eat roasted meat. We have to eat roasted meat for the Korban Pesach. And when the temple was destroyed, that question was removed. And it was replaced with a question of reclining. Why on every night so first of all, when the questions were made up, that wasn't any question. Everybody ate misubim, right? But that question, so I remember Dr. Lamb saying, basically that question is the Romans tried to destroy Judaism. And leaning at meals, that comes from that was the Roman practice. And we say that question 2,000 years after, please God, I'm going to Rome on Sunday. This is where I'm going. Our trip to Italy is starting from Rome. There's a lot of wonderful Jewish history there, really amazing. But the Romans, we've outlived the Romans. They're Romans today are Italians. They're not Romans. I don't know. However you want to describe it, that the Roman culture is no longer, but we are longer. And that's what we say when we say the fourth question. So that's one way to look at it on a sort of anti-Semitic global way. But even on My question was when we look at it on an individual level, like another Jew insulted you. So even then, sometimes you should, yeah, be quiet. You'll be better off. Don't take everything so personally. And it could be my nefesh. Maybe internally, I'm not bothered. By externally, if I can get money out of the guy, he cheated me. I'm going to go to court. Maybe that's how you understood it. My nefesh should be I should be at peace with myself. You can go to court and tear your hair out in court, or you can go to court very peacefully and see what happens. So perhaps that's what it means. Okay, let me just start. I see it's getting a little late. Let's introduce the next expression, Petach libi b'toratecha. So we ask God, we don't want to talk Lashon Hara. Everybody talks Lashon Hara. Everybody talks at least some form of Lashon Hara. And we don't even want to talk deceitfully. Right, there's Lashon Hara, and then there's Mirma. It's truth, but it's a little deceitfully. And then we want to, and then when other people speak about us, right, when they talk Lashon Hara about us, we don't want to get too excited about it. And we want to realize, and some say also Nafshi Kafar, that like this is sort of a more negative sense. People, the far, you just walk in the far, let people step on you, kind of speak. Like, so they step on you, it's the same thing. Like, okay, no big deal. Don't get too upset about it, but I like the sort of more positive understanding. And then we sort of switch to the way we should worship God. Petach libi b'tortecha. They obviously are connected. One who's at peace of mind, much easier to worship God. If you can have that, if not, you know how to deal with other people who insult you. It's you're in much better life. And we should, again, our soul should run after mitzvot. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. Let's start. What does that mean? What does it mean to open our heart in Torah? What does it mean to love God with all our heart? We discussed it, I guess, a long time ago.
It shouldn't just be an intellectual pursuit.
How we were talking at the beginning, the emotional, right? You have to have an emotional tie. Okay, you have to feel it, right? Tefillah, all of Tefillah is avodah shevalev. The words are just an outward expression of what's supposed to be an inward feeling. You don't fulfill the mitzvah of tefillah by saying words. You fulfill it in the heart. In order to get the heart moving, we have to say words. That's Rav Soloveitchik's famous distinction, because the kiyum mitzvah and the maseh mitzvah. The kiyum mitzvah, the fulfillment of the mitzvah, maseh is the action, the mechanics, the logistics of a mitzvah. So the mechanics of the mitzvah of prayer is to say Shmon Esrei. That's how we daven. We say these words, but that doesn't fulfill the mitzvah. That's the mechanics of prayer. We fulfill the mitzvah by the feelings in our heart. That's why theoretically we don't do this. But if somebody davened Shmon Esrei and wasn't paying attention, they have to daven again. The Shulchan Aruch says we don't do that anymore. It's because you spend all day davening, because the second time you don't pay attention either. It's a sad comment, but also one of these inspiring comments, that when you go to shul and you forget if you said Aleinu or not, remember, don't worry. And Rav Yosef Kar also, everybody had the same problem back then. And I assume there you you said the Shmon Esrei, you just know you weren't paying attention. That's life. We try to do, because the davening used to be taken much more seriously, and you weren't allowed to daven if you weren't in the right frame of mind. The halakha is, I think I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago, when you came back on a trip, you couldn't daven. You need time to settle in. Nobody does that anymore, because then, daven, that was really serious. You're really before the king. Now we just mumble words. So you can mumble words whenever you want. I don't mean this as an insult. I just mean it the reality. That's what the halachic authorities say. So it's hard. So we try, but
so this parallels the Hashem Svasai Tiftach at the beginning.
100% are live right. But Yehi l'ratzoni v'hegyon libi lefanecha. We end with hegyon libi. It should be our heart, right? The heart and lips, but the heart is more important than the lips. But you need both. I'm trying to think. It's not enough just to have the heart. You have to do the actions of the mitzvah. Okay, so I just want to start with, so we know in Pirkei Avot, when Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai asked his top 5 students, what is the most important character trait a person shall have, and what was the conclusion of the Mishnah?
Lev Tov.
Lev Tov. And who says so?
Rabbi Elazar ben Arach.
And who is he?
Was he the Bor Sid? Was he the Bor Sid?
Okay, let's take a look. No, he wasn't the Bor seed, actually. Let's take a quick look in Pirkei Avot. Yes, okay.
The one who became a Nasi when he was young.
No, that's Rav Elazar ben Azariah. But good guess. That's okay. Okay, Chamisha Talmidim Ayula Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai. Now, of course, he had more than five, but Elohim, Rav Elazar ben Horkanis, that's Rav Elazar Hagadol. That was the one who was put in Cherem, Torah lo b'shamayim, the oven, that's that one. Rav Yeshua ben Chananya, that's the typical Rav Yeshua, all the time. He was a slightly older contemporary of Rav Elazar. Rav Yeshua, I argue with him a lot. Rav Yossi Kohen, who we hear less about. Rav Shimon ben Netanel, who we hear very not so much about either. Rav Shimon bar Yochai, we hear a lot about, and Rav Elazar ben Arach. Now, then he would say, who's great? Rav Elazar ben Arach he's the Bor Suj Eno Beitipa. He's like a sister, never a photographic memory. And Rav Elazar ben Horkin is a Mayan Hamid Gaber. He's a overflowing well. Which is more important? So this is a debate in the Mishnah. Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai would say, if you had a scale and Elazar ben Horkanis was on one side, he knocks off all the rabbis. He weighs down no matter, because a guy who has a photographic memory, who knows everything, knowledge of Torah, that's the most important thing in the world. And Elazar ben Horkin, hold on. I'm sorry. Yeah. So Rabbi Elazar would win. Abba Shaul, it seems to be a debate. What did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai say? Maybe he changed his mind. Abba Shaul quotes Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai saying, if all the teachers of Israel are on one side, including Rabbi Elazar ben Horkanis, but Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, the Mayan Hamid Gaber, was on the second side, he would win. What is this argument about? I don't have time. Maybe we'll pick up with this the next week. But just to mention, this is an argument. What's a Mayan Hamikaber? Mayan Hamikaber. This is the difference between Mayan Hamikaber is like analytical ability. This is between Reb Chaim Soloveitchik and
A synthesizer.
it's the difference. Because it's somebody who doesn't know everything. He can figure everything out.
Oker Harim versus...
Right, exactly. The Gemara has a debate. What's more important, Oker Harim or a Sinai? It seems to be the same word. A Sinai means he knows everything, and an Oker Harim means when he can uproot mountains. His analytical ability.
He's creative.
Rav Soloveitchik did not have a photographic memory. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein knew where every Gemara was. Rav Soloveitchik did not. And I've heard this from many people who were, I was never there, but often Rav Soloveitchik would quote, he didn't remember exactly where it was. And he would turn to Rav Aaron Lichtenstein to tell him where Rav Lichtenstein would just rip off. They had a different way of thinking, or it's like the story I think you've heard me say, when somebody came to Rav Chaim Soloveitchik and said, they quoted a Tosfot, and Rav Chaim said, that's not in Tosfot. Tosfot doesn't say that. And he said, do you know every Tosfot? Did you know Rav Chaim doesn't say that? So he says, no, I don't. But I know Rav Chaim couldn't say that. I know Tosfot couldn't say that. That's a different way of thinking. I understand the thinking. Tosfot, I don't know every Tosfot, but he couldn't say it. So it's very interesting. I was just talking to my son in Israel. So he lanes very often. They often ask him to lane. He's a very good Balkari, so he lanes at Achov Eitzion. So I actually made a joke with him today. Maybe I shouldn't say. He tells me other Bali Kriya they often pay when they're desperate, but he never gets paid. He does a volunteer, whatever. I said, no, are they going to pay you from finally? Because they'll ask him on Thursday, sometimes he should lane. So he'll never ask for money. So very nice. So then he told me, well, President Herzog is coming to shul on Shabbos. So I said, oh, maybe you have to pay them to lane. And I said, hey, no, yeah, they're making davening a half an hour later. President Herzog's coming to daven in shul tomorrow. I said, okay, very nice. So I said, you can tell him the story. My kids know, I've told the story, you probably know the story too. Nechama Leibowitz told us, I heard it from her. Nechama Leibowitz went to Rav Herzog to ask her a question. This, of course, the current president's grandfather, who he's named after, Isaac Halevi, was a Gon Shabbat owning. And he asked them a question, and I've done this. And Rav Herzog went this, and Nechama did. Rav Herzog went like this. The Bavli Zalon Nimsa. It's not in the Babylonian Talmud. And then he said he couldn't do that in the Jerusalem Talmud. He can't go like this. So that's, I assume, he had a Rav Hirschsprung in Montreal. If any of you ever met him, Rav Hirschsprung from Montreal, that's Morris, that's Tibor Judah and Zell Newman's father-in-law. I'm sure you knew him, right? Rav Hirschsprung. So Rav Hirschsprung, I saw him, he came to Orchaim when I was in high school, and he asked kids were learning, you put literally the pin test, you put a word down, and he would tell you 20 pages later what letter is underneath that pin. He knew Shas. It was well known. He knew Shas backwards and forwards, every letter, every word, Baal Peh. But he didn't. He'll be the first. Was first to admit he didn't have that great analytical mind. He considered Rav Soloveitchik a greater London than he was. He knew everything. So the Gemara says, which is more important? We have to end. I say it's getting late. So the Gemara concludes a Sinai is more important. The one who knows everything. The one who upwards bound. You need basic knowledge. You can start analyzing, you can make up anything. It has to be rooted in knowledge. That's what the Gemara says. Today, Rav Aaron Lichtenstein and many others have said this is no longer true. That was true when the Torah Baal Peh was not allowed to be written down. So you needed people who knew the Talmud, but there wasn't really a Talmud, but you understand what I mean. They knew everything in their mind, because there is no access to the information that couldn't be written down. But once today, you don't know anything. You just go to Chat GPT, and that's we did the last week in chat. Our end of year meetings that we always have in the year end was all about preparing for next year, getting on board with. They brought in some artificial intelligence experts, and how are we going to use Chat GPT? They have a whole system for chat in the classroom and cheating, but it's amazing. I said, do a curriculum for contemporary halacha. And and they made up an exam in 4 seconds. I had an exam, questions, assignments, curriculum, unbelievable. It's astounding what it can do. So you don't have to know anything anymore, but you have to know how to analyze. I mean, whatever. It's still nice to know things. But
there's a Yiddish expression, the gelernte nar, the educated fool.
The educated, right, correct. So AI is a total idiot, has zero. It's a total idiot. It just knows everything. But what to do with what it knows is what's important. So it makes a lot of sense. Today, the Sinai is much less important than the Oker Harm. We need people. Anyways, we'll click up, please God, on Rav Elazar ben Aruch and Leiv Tov and the good heart and what's because it Petachli be, right? What do we say? What do we say in Hallel? Pitchuli Sharit. No, that's Pitchuli Sharit Tzedek. Okay, any difference? Okay, so let's just very quickly review. Okay, I spoke about some of the different French and Italian minhagim in shuls, organ playing, mechitzas and reform shuls. Combination of minhagim. When you travel the world, you get to see Baruch Hashem, whatever different minhagim, and very beautiful. Unfortunately, it's in Europe. There's a lot of assimilation here, worse than in America and a lot of these places. I mean, there's still shuls and people. Of course, I went to shuls where I was impressed. 25 people at Minyan this morning, and we're in the downtown area, the old Jewish neighborhood, but it's not where most of the Jews live. Anyway, it's not really that important, but very nice. Okay, then we spoke a little about. We started in Elokai Netzor. We all talked Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara, Bak Lashon Hara, knock-knocking, Mirma, and then we really focused on what does it mean. Those who curse us, we should be we should be silent. Vayitom Aaron is acceptance. Is that always true? Maybe it depends who's insulting us. Is it we're talking about anti-Semites and to ignore them, or somebody who's just ridiculous? Or it means at times it doesn't mean that you can never respond or you can never try to get what's owing to you. And in many places, we see that all the time. But I think what we're saying is that internally, our nefesh should be at peace. Even people insult us, whether you want to take the Sefer HaChinuch, I find kind of radical idea, or I don't know what idea to talk about that. Whenever something bad happens to you, it's just the will of God. I don't know. I mean, yes, that's true after the fact, but it doesn't mean we don't react and we're trying to prevent it. But be that as it may, and then we spoke about that we should be like dust or the earth, and the metaphor of the earth. Avram, Afar, and Aphar. One is the past, one is the future. Ashes is what was, but is no longer. The earth is what is not now, but will be in the future when you plant. And of course, Avram was saying he's neither, but the Jewish people are like Afar Haaretz. We are like, we give seed, we give morality. Yes, and on this level too, let people trample on you, or as Tosfot said, but always think about the eternity of the Jewish people, how people grow. We are sort of the seeds of the world, so to speak, and that's our job. As we said, Avram uses that expression, Avram Eber, when God says, the reason I'm choosing Avram to be my partner, that I'm going to consult with him about Stom, is because I know he's going to teach his children to do tzedakah umishpat. So therefore, he's my partner. He's going to be this special person carrying out God's mission, and therefore he will join in my partnership. And then we just began to talk about the lave. What we have talked about, we would open our heart, difference between actions and what we think internally. And then we tied that in. We were just talking about the Lev Tov, and we got up to Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Lazar ben Horkin, the Sinai and the Yokar Har. What's more important, the person who knows everything, or the one who can apply knowledge? Who doesn't know so much can apply knowledge. Okay. Let's see any question. They say Shaul Lieberman, Bavli Yerushalmi inside out. That is probably true. People say Shaul Lieberman was the greatest Baki in Talmud in the world. I told you the story once. Mark Shapiro, of course, who leads our trip, mentioned it, that he used to go to Israel every summer, Shaul Lieberman, and his student, now I'm forgetting his name, was the professor at Bar-Ilan University, would drive him to the airport always. And so one year when he drove him to the airport, they got to the airport, Shaul Lieberman said to him, "You were speeding." So he said, "How do you know?" He says, "Because every year I review Baba Kama, or whatever it is that he reviews in the car on the way to the airport, and I couldn't finish the whole Masechet on the way to the airport. You must have gone to the airport too quickly." So that was Shaul Lieberman. Yes, and I mean, I do recommend, I always like to recommend books. I don't know how many people follow up, but okay, a little bit. Mark Shapiro wrote this beautiful pamphlet. It's not long. You can read it in a couple hours, less. Shaul Lieberman, the Orthodox. As I'm sure most people know, Shaul Lieberman, of course, spent his most part of, the second part of his life, his career at the Jewish Theological Seminary, part of the conservative movement, although his minion had machitza at the minion, he was, and Mark wrote a little pamphlet. Some of his friends in Slobodka remained very good friends. Rav Yaakov Kamenet remained good friends with him, and some people turned against him. Rav Aaron Kotler can't have anything to do with him. He went to the seminary, and they wrote this book, Shaul Lieberman and the Orthodox, and of course he gave a whole series on Shaul Lieberman and the Orthodox. But yes, Shaul Lieberman was a tremendous Baki, but also probably, but he focused on Tosefta, very interesting things, but yes. Who was Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch? So we will pick up on that, please God, next week. What exactly? I mean, that we just saw in the Mishnah. He's one of the 5 students of Rabbi Elazar, of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who is credited as being a Mayan Hamika Baron, overflowing body of water, an overflowing well, that always giving new insights into Torah.
Rabbi,
Okay?
By the way,
and I
there
just-
is a nice. Go ahead, Debbie.
It's Sima. No, I just wanted to.
okay.
It's okay. Just one quick thing for Rabbi Kelman. When in your conversation about the shuls and the organ pipes, I just wanted to. I don't know if you know that the shul that your, I think his cousin Leib.
Live,
Kelman,
sure.
where I
On
dive in-
Ditmas? Yes.
So we used to joke around about the organ pipes behind the Aron Kodesh because
Oh.
it was originally a church
Oh, okay.
that the
So
shul
that's
took over, but
so
there were
but-
these huge organ pipes behind the Aron Kodesh, and could have used them.
that's of course why it became so terrible. In other words, the reform were copying it from the church, which is why it got such a negative reaction from the traditional rabbinate.
That makes sense.
Now, by the way, I remember Rabbi Kamara, who some of you may know, is the vice principal at Chat in Wiener Why? So he gave a shir once in shul on Shabbos. It's fascinating in Italy. And now today, oh my gosh! Apparently, the Italian chazanim would go to church to pick up tunes that they could bring. They would sit in the back, and they're behind the curtain. Imagine today, that's what they did in the Middle Ages. They wanted to pick up. Listen, church. We just walked in Milan. There's this unbelievable church here. The Domo. It's like it took 500 years to build the church. I don't have to tell you. And Jews often lived in the shadow of the church. I just, it was protection very much. The church actually protected. I just wrote in my thought that I sent out this morning. The church actually was much better than the average Christian. It was the masses of Christians who often killed Jews. The church didn't believe in killing Jews. They believed in degrading Jews, but they didn't believe in killing us. They believed in protecting us. So the Jews always lived either right under the church or the royal palace. They often lived right next to. And they were influenced, and often they were forced to attend church services. Often the church would force Jews to go, but here the Chazanim would go, so they get ideas from music. We know, obviously, there's been Christian influence on Jewish practice. So when the organ, this is what happened. But in Italy, they played the organ, and that was acceptable. But now the world's a global village, so now everything's mixed up, and they can sing Karl Bach in the shul in Nice. You got a problem. I don't, a problem, but like it's that wouldn't have happened 100 years ago. So now the organs are all out. What are you doing, Yocheved? What are you putting there?
Oh, so I just wanted to mention that there is a nice biography of Shul Lieberman by two of his students. So it gives you more of a picture of him as a person, not just his intellectual accomplishments.
He married the
Yeah.
Netziv's granddaughter.
Yeah, of
I
course.
just
Yeah.
quoted on
Judith.
the Netziv.
Right. Yeah.
Rachel Lieberman, that's Rav Meir Berlin's daughter. Rav Meir,
Yeah.
who was at Orline University. The Netziv was over 70 when his wife died, then he married his niece, a 36-year date difference, whole story there, amazing story, right? His brother-in-law becomes his father-in-law, and I don't recommend that necessarily. And they had one son, Rav Meir Berlin, became Bar Ilan and Bar Ilan University, and it was his daughter, right, who Shul Lieberman married. So he married the Netziv's granddaughter. She was the principal of Shulamit, I understand, for many years, right? I think.
Yes, yeah. My mother actually went to Shalamis when she was there.
There you go.
But anyway, so this biography, you find out more about him as a person, his whole life. It's a bit of a hagiography because written by two of his close students, but anyway, I just shared it in case anyone's interested.
Thank you very much. Yes, Marty.
You when you were teaching, you sort of, I'm sorry, you sort of used the word vengeance and response as if they were synonymous, and I'm not sure that they are. I think, like we say in Dublin, Kelman comes for Sam, which seems vengeance seems to me not violent or response. It seems to me like gratuitous violence that goes beyond what you would be entitled to.
So I'm sorry, you asked me what did I say is synonymous that you're not sure?
Response and vengeance. I'm saying
vengeance
I'm saying that not all response is vengeance.
Right, correct. Not all response is vengeance. I would agree. That's what I'm trying to say. But when we say nafshi tidom, means like to be totally slight, to be totally acceptance. That's what it sounds like. Correct. It's not right. The truth of the matter is, where do you draw the line? That's why I raised at the beginning. Where do you draw the line between revenge and seeking justice? And the fact that it goes to court doesn't seem to me to be enough of a distinction that just because it's in court. Like now we know in a court you can talk lashon hara. Obviously you have to talk lashon hara in court. Somebody you're going to say negative things. Obviously it's allowed. We know there are many times lashon hara is allowed and mandatory to prevent harm. So somebody owes you money or somebody you have to do justice. So to do justice you can speak lashon hara. So yes, there's certain things in court that are allowed, but I don't exactly know. Where do you draw the line between revenge? Seems to be where I'm doing it in order to get back to you for no other reason. Like you didn't give me $100, I won't get. That's revenge. If it's done for non-revenge reasons, then it's different. You're right. I do think the same act can be revengeful or not vengeful. Probably only we know, and God knows. Like it's sometimes we ourselves don't know. It's we don't even know ourselves sometimes why we do things. So I don't know. It is a good question that I don't have a clear-cut answer to tell you this is revenge and this is justice. I don't know where you draw the line necessarily. Maybe they're both. I don't know. Anyways, okay, everybody, be well. Have a Shabbat Shalom. It's Shabbos a little earlier where I am, and okay, you should well, please God, you should hear good things. And okay, Rabbi Liebtag, 11:15 on Sunday morning Eastern. Okay, Shabbat
Okay,
Shalom,
good
everybody.
Shabbos.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, bye bye.